Right, good afternoon, everybody. So yeah, we're going to talk about our new service, DataNation. This is our new service based upon Digimap for Schools, but bringing a new interface and bringing a wealth of additional data as well as the mapping. We've got the census data and a few other interesting bits and pieces data sets in there. The idea around DataNation was about bringing more than just a mapping service. This is very much based on the idea of data handling and data skills and supporting that as a cross-curricular resource, but very much from a kind of geographic data point of view. So we'll get into the actual service in just a minute, but just to highlight a few key things. So as well as the data, we have a few learning resources which we'll be building upon as well, but I'll point you to the current resources that we have just now for some ideas for getting started. As well as the contemporary mapping and then all the additional data sets. We still have the historical mapping, the 1890s and 1950s, which you're hopefully familiar with from the Digimap from School service as well, and the aerial imagery. We have the ability that you can add your own information onto the map through the sort of graphics and the annotation panels. We've got an enhanced add your own data tool as well, which I'll show you how we use that and how you can interact with the census data on that. So really the benefits of having this as an additional service, and it helps support data analysis, data handling, which is all part of encouraging critical thinking. And again, although it's based upon mapping and very much sort of geo kind of statistical type data sets, there's different applications beyond just geography and social studies, and there's a lot about that you can do with numeracy, thinking about themes of sustainability, social justice, and all these kind of themes around that social data. So let's hop into the demo. So I'm already logged in, but this is the homepage, datanation.adena.ac.uk. If you're not logged in, instead of this go to DataNation button, you would have just your username and password and boxes in there. So I'm already logged in. So if I just flip to this screen here. So this is me as load when you first come in. So this is using a different style of interface from Digimap for Schools, but I'll go through and you'll see we've still got some of our all the main features. The main difference here you'll see when I open up is this society panel is expanded, and this is where we can interact with the census data sets and the other social economic data sets that we have. But just a few quick pointers on the navigating, which I'm sure you're all familiar with, but I can double click to zoom in and go through my layer stack, or I've still got up here in the top left that I can search place name, postcode, and gives me some options. There's a bit of different searching in there, but there we go, we've got my different things. And then the base maps icon function here, this is where I can change between the different data sets. So if I just drag this slider across, I can peel away the contemporary map and see the 1890s underneath. So that's how we still can access the different mapping and different data sets. And I'll just pop that back to contemporary. And I'm just going to zoom out a little bit here. So I'm going to use, we're based in Edinburgh, so we know Edinburgh, but I'm going to use Edinburgh as my example of showing you, kind of talking through a bit of a narrative that you could perhaps do with the data sets, with the census data sets, and you can think about how you can apply similar thinking to your local area, or and the benefit of DataNation is the same Digimap for Schools, is the data that we've got is GB coverage, so you could be looking at places that you don't know, perhaps building up a picture based on somewhere you know, and then using the same data and looking at somewhere you don't know, and see if you can build up a picture of that location based all through the data. So if I just start looking at some of the data sets on the left in the society panel, so there's a lot here, so obviously I won't go through all of them, adding them all on, but it's really simple to view. If you just click and that will expand to show this little legend on the left, and then the data will load on the screen. So you can see, so this gives us a shaded map or a choropleth map, and for example this is showing us the percentage of people who responded to the census in 2011 who live alone, and obviously the darker areas have a higher percentage. So quite classic sort of view there. So I'm going to zoom in one level and see if I can fit this all on the screen. It's a bit nicer. And certainly across Edinburgh, and you'll see this in your own local area and other places, is we've got very distinct geographic patterns that we can see there, very distinct areas in the city centre and following out to the kind of north and the east and out to the west, where we've got distinct patterns of a higher percentage of people living alone. So the other thing that I can do on this data as well is if I click in one area, you'll see it highlighted in red. And if I scroll down the left-hand panel, this is now giving me the detailed attributes of this data set. So as well as the number of households that are one person, you can see that there's a much more detailed breakdown of other attributes for this data set. And this is because the census information that we're using here, if you imagine it as like one big table, as you can see there, we're taking one of those values and creating a map one at a time and making the different layers. And if I'm just going to double click to zoom in as well and just show you as you go into a larger scale, you can see that these areas that we're mapping by change and we get into smaller areas. So these boundaries here represent what we call output areas, and these are the largest scale, so the smallest spatial unit then that the census data gets released as. And as you see, as we go to the larger scale and display this against the master map data, we start displaying percentages per area of the actual values of that area. And again, we can click on it and see the detailed breakdown. And also on this left-hand panel, can also click and you can bring up a little pie chart. So we're starting talking about data handling, how to present different statistical information. So you can see there on the screen that we've got it mapped, we've got it in a table, and then we've got it in a pie chart. So you can be talking with your students about different ways of data presentation, how you can build up different pictures or get different interpretations from the different ways that you present data. So just going back to this list here, I'm just going to collapse this down just to make it a bit smaller so we can see. So we've got broad groupings here. So this first big list of layers is information about individuals. So this would be the main person who's responded to the census. This is details about them, or as you can see, there's also about couples as well. But we've got so you've got household composition, people living alone, couples, married, lone parents, and then we go into qualifications. So we can looking at areas of if I just zoom out a little bit, just so we get a better idea. The areas where the people have no formal qualifications, and then different levels of qualifications, and then more other layers about different types of families, and then population, and there's a whole load of information. And then as we scroll down, we've got more household level information, so statistics on households with no cars, for example. Again, really useful to look at, or interesting to look at the difference between cities and more suburban or rural areas as well, and look at the different patterns of ownership and think about the reasons for the spatial patterns that you see. And then further down the bottom, a few other data sets that we've got that aren't specifically based on the census data. We have, for example, internet user classification. This is a classification that's been built by a number of academics, And this is just based on information about different kind of interactions with internet use. So you can see there we've got passive and uncommitted, digital seniors, and just useful urban fringe. So again, you can be looking at areas and saying, how does that relate to what we know about our own area, and how do other areas that we don't know, if we go and look at them through the data set, how do they look? And broadband availability as well, and this is an Ofcom, I think, and I think this was based on super fast broadband. And finally, the other data set that we've got down here, the neighbourhood description. So this again is a classification data set. So this takes census data sets or census statistics, and it's a classification that's been built by the Office of National Statistics and University College London. And it's originally based on an academic classification that was built for the 2001 data. And they've built up, based on a number of attributes from the census data, they've then used that to classify areas, and they've given them descriptions. So at this sort of smaller scale, we can see largely Edinburgh city centre is made up of what we call cosmopolitans, and then as we go out, we've got a much more mixed kind of area between urbanites, suburbanites, and different pockets of other types of classifications. Over on the west here, the broad group of constrained city dwellers. And if I just zoom in a little bit more, we can see this. So this is at the output area level. So again, if we come into the larger scale, you can see the distinct polygons here and the different areas. And then if I click on an area, and again, you can tell it clicked by it being highlighted in red and zoomed down, we get the description here. So it says this neighbourhood is characterised by hard-pressed renters who are members of the challenged terrace workers who are members of the hard-pressed living. Now, the classification is a hierarchical classification, so that's why it's termed this way. So it starts off at the high level of 8 supergroups and then breaks down into groups and subgroups. Now, this classification might be quite challenging in a way to talk about, with students, depending on your demographic or where you're looking at. But I'll stress this is an academic classification. It's not a classification that we've come up with. This is an existing, it's out there, it's an open data set. But I think it opens up really healthy debate as well as to whether, how does the data set lend itself to developing this classification? Does the classification match with what you or your pupils know about an area? But that's all the different data sets in there, but there's a lot to drill through. So if I just zoom back out, I'll go through, as I say, a sort of narrative that you could build up with these types of data sets is not so much looking at one in isolation, but looking at a number of the data sets together. So if we jump back to which one I'm looking for, the no qualification ones for Edinburgh, I was saying that you can see again distinct patterns where you've got pockets of areas in the west, in the north, and in the northeast of the city where there's quite a relatively higher percentage of people without qualifications. And then we could start linking that through and thinking, well, how does that then reflect other aspects of the society and what comes through in the data sets? So we could be looking at, again, how does that tie in with the people living alone? Is there a correlation there? Less so perhaps with lone parents. So you can start building up these pictures and building through a narrative of talking about a place. Another data set here that certainly with Edinburgh shows quite distinct patterns that again relates through the socially rented housing, so again council housing or housing association housing. Again, we've got quite a distinct pattern across the city, and there's a number of data sets where that pattern's reflected reflected, and you can start talking about why, where's the process, where do people who need social housing, what other things are they not experiencing? Are they areas with low qualifications, certain household compositions? And obviously the converse as well, where you're looking at where households that are owned, that are mortgaged, or owned outright, and again, how do they reflect through? Are they areas where there's higher car ownership? Are those areas where there's higher, people are generally educated to higher levels, and those sorts of things? As well as drilling through just the data sets like that, what we can also do is start downloading some of the data set and doing some data analysis out with DataNation. So if I zoom back in and just choose an area at random, and I'm going to zoom down on the left here, you'll see that there's a download button here. So what this does is this will create a little CSV file, which can then be opened up in Excel or any kind of package like that, and it will give you this table. So if I hit download, and I'll just download this to my computer. And I'm going to open this up. So you can see here, this is giving me that table that I could see in DataNation, but it's giving me the breakdown. So for this area in Murrayfield, it tells me that there was 362 households, 329 of them were owned, etc. And then the idea here now is that pupils could start doing their own calculations, calculating their own percentages, or again presenting the data in different ways and perhaps in different charts. And you could go and download a number of areas, because you can only select one polygon at a time to download areas. You could download a number of areas, copy and paste those values into one file, and then and perhaps do different graphs or different calculations on that data. I'm going to zoom out again on this. So I mentioned in the introduction that the other tools that we have, so we've got on this tab here where the little pencil is, this is the drawing tools. So this is based upon the annotation tools that we have in Digimap for Schools, but we've extended them and we've added a number of emoji markers. And the point around that, it may look a little yum or a bit of an odd choice, but we thought that this type of census data very much lends itself to emotional mapping and reflecting if a pupils or group of pupils are talking about their area, how they feel about places, whether it's happy places, places that they don't feel safe in, things that they don't like, that they could start adding that onto the map. And again, they could relate that through to the census data and see whether those feelings are reflected within any of the particular indicators in the census data. So that's why we've got them. But otherwise, the tools work very simply. Click and put a marker on the map, and again with the emojis, you can do that. You can draw areas and add your text. So if you're familiar with the annotation tools in Digimap for Schools, that's all the same sort of stuff. And the other thing to show you with the add your own data, you may or may not be familiar with, we have the functionality in Digimap for Schools where you can import a point data set from what we call a CSV file, and we've extended this a bit now in the DataNation to add a few more tools. And the idea around this is that you could be going out and collecting your own data set. And DataNation, this would be based on postcodes. So if you or your pupils were out, again, perhaps doing some sort of field work in your local high street and maybe gathering information from members of the public, asking where they've come from, what do they like or dislike about an area, you could capture those pupils, you could ask them for their postcode, and then write down whatever it is that they like or don't like, and then import that data. You could also use crime data comes available online, and you can get that per postcode, so you could extract some data sets online. Again, this is all data handling skills. Create a data set with postcodes and then maybe a type of crime, import that onto the data, onto the map, display it, and compare it against the census data sets as well. So the file that I've got here, just to do as an example, and I'll show you it in here first. So this is, so in Scotland we have the pupil equity funding, and this is where this government is gives extra funding to schools based upon the number of pupils up to S3 that receive free school meals. And this is information that's publicly available, and you can get the per school allocation. This is getting a bit out of date now. This is the 2018/19 allocation. But I've got here, so I've got a number of fields in my data set, but I've got, most importantly, I've got the school name, and at the end here, I've got the school postcode, and I've got the information about the amount of money that those schools received. And what I can do in DataNation is I can point to this file and import it. And you can see that a number of red dots have appeared on the map. And that's a point being put on the map for each of those schools, and that's based on the postcode. And now I can display that data. And the enhancements we've made to this tool over Digimap for Schools, if you've seen it, is now that you can make some choices about how the data is displayed. So from here, I can choose how I want my point to appear based on a variable in the data. So this is listing all my attributes of that data set. So for this, I'm going to choose stage. So I've got primary or secondaries. So I've got balloon markers for the primary schools, and it's defaulted to cross for the secondaries. And then we're just going to change that to diamond because it often stands out a little bit more. And then I can also label those points. So I could choose school, excuse me, but that's quite cluttered because they're quite long. Or what's more interesting is looking at the values that these schools. So I should have said, sorry, this data set is for the schools in Edinburgh that received over £100,000 in PEF funding of that 18-19. So I forgot to say that. It's obviously not all the schools in Edinburgh. If I just zoom in one level so it's a little bit clearer. But again, now what I can do is I can be going to look at my data sets and start comparing this across with how does this look with other factors that we may think tie in with these schools that are receiving more funding. And remember, as I said, it's based on free school meals, so it ties into things that we may expect, the areas where there's higher levels of people with no qualifications, and then the pattern as well of houses that are socially rented. So again, this is just to help build up that narrative of that external data that you can bring in, and how does that tie in with what you see in the census data, what do they tell you about each other. Again, this could be data that you get on, you can be doing this with any of your local data or data for somewhere else. This could be data that you get online or data that you've created yourself. That's the main things about how the service works. The few other things just to show you for tools. We've got the save map, so you can save any of your maps. If you import any of your data, like I've just done, that won't save with your map. DataNation is still a developing product, so we've got we're adding a few enhancements are still coming the way. That will come. Printing as well. We've got printing again. If you import data, that currently won't print with your map, but if you add any on with annotations, that will. So you can Edinburgh. We can make a map, PDF or JPEG, A4 or A3, landscape portrait. We can add a legend on this, and this is just going to create a PDF. So remember, at this point, this isn't going off to your printer. This is just creating a PDF file. just take a wee moment to open this PDF file. So you can see I've got my map and I've got my scale, my north arrow, etc. But it's got my map with my my census data that I've chosen to view. The other thing that comes with that I ticked was the option to have a legend. This comes as a separate PDF page rather than on the map, but it gives me my values of the census data that's shown there. So that's a whirlwind tour of the actual service and the tools. I'm just going to jump back to the home page to point you to the learning resources. So back on datanation.edina.ac.uk, we've got the learning resources. This takes you to our learning centre now. At the moment, we've only got a few on here. These are written by a former senior maths lecturer at Murray House here in Edinburgh. So they've got a bit of Scottish slant on them, but you can certainly, all the themes are very applicable across the country. So if I look at household tenure, this is looking at using the data just to explore that pattern of household tenure, looking at the socially rented accommodation. And there's some background to it, some reading, and then there's the main activity that you can work through. Excuse me. And you can see it's very much just what I've shown you in the demonstration, clicking through, looking at the different areas and looking at the spatial distribution and thinking about reasons as to why that is. So I hope that helps. If you've already subscribed to DataNation, hopefully it gives you a bit of background as to what the service has and what it can offer and where we see that it fits in. And if you're thinking about subscribing, hopefully that gives you some more information about it as well. So we've got time to take questions or answer any questions if there's been any. Right? Not at the moment. So please feel free to type in the questions box. Yeah, if you've got any questions. Otherwise, that's all we've got to show you just now. If you've nothing to say or add, you can just close down the GoToWebinar and it'll shut. If you think of anything afterwards, please obviously get in touch with us and ask questions.